So the race is on to vaccinate the planet, but can they deliver? They is the pharmaceutical giants who've rolled out jabs in record time, but are now scrambling to ramp up production. They is also the political leaders who paid upfront in some cases for the research and the delivery of those vaccines. We'll ask about the threats to force Big Pharma to make good on its promises of speedy delivery, and the promise by European leaders to have 70% of the population inoculated by the end of August. Here in France, the vaccine race has prompted, well, you could say a second bout of soul-searching. After underperforming in the mass testing department back in the spring, why is a nation so proud of its long list of Nobel Science laureates yet to deliver the goods on vaccines? Has the pandemic laid bare the consequences of decades of defunding in the research and education sectors? Or is it the whole health sector, public and private, that needs a rethink? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the race to vaccinate. Joining us, epidemiologist Dr. Catherine Hill, who joins us from the French capital. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Also with us here in the studio, entrepreneur and commentator Jakob Hessler. Nice to see you. Thérèse Bouvray is the publisher of the newsletter biotech.info. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
And from Copenhagen, Danish Green member of the European Parliament, Margrethe Auken. Thanks for being with us. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, Europe swore to itself it would not repeat those ugly scenes back in the spring when borders closed and masked nationalism had member states competing against one another. So it embarked on this ambitious plan to pool its orders for vaccine. There's strength in numbers, you might say. But negotiations in the name of 27 can be slow and cumbersome. We can show you a chart by a French newspaper Le Monde that shows how first the price per dose and also the doses promises. The first that are now in use as of a month ago are Pfizer and now Moderna. One of the first tentative deals struck back in June was with AstraZeneca, with 2.1 billion euros set aside. But the deal was only finalized in August. There you see the numbers with, as you can see, the prices per dose vary, and the number of doses planned is also very variable. Those are the firm orders you're seeing. Now that it's finally come to market, the French and the Germans are not convinced when it comes to AstraZeneca and people over 65. Olivia Salazar-Winspear has more.
It's the most recent vaccine to arrive on European markets, the Anglo-Swedish inoculation, AstraZeneca. On Tuesday, France's top health authority recommended the jabs for people under the age of 65.
Il manque des données pour les patients de plus de 65 ans et que ces données vont arriver dans les semaines qui viennent.
In the meantime, priority will be given to health professionals and people between the ages of 50 and 65. While its competitors Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna have a success rate of over 90%, AstraZeneca's results are less convincing. The jab is nearly 60% effective. But scientists have stressed that this rate is still higher than most vaccines against the flu. Spacing the first and second doses over a longer period shows better long-term results. That's according to scientists.
Pour ce vaccin-là, AstraZeneca et Oxford, l'université d'Oxford, ont pu démontrer que l'espacement des deux doses, en allant jusqu'à 12 semaines, semblait augmenter l'efficacité.
Unlike its competitors, the AstraZeneca vaccine is very easy to store. It can be kept between 2 and 8 degrees, making it possible for doses to be given in pharmacies.
Ce qui est important, c'est qu'en vaccinant en pharmacie, il n'y a pas de rupture de la chaîne de froid.
The first jabs could be given from mid-February. AstraZeneca has committed itself to delivering 2.5 million doses by the end of the month.
Dr. Catherine Hill, you saw in that report how pharmacies in particular are looking forward to that vaccine, because one of the problems we're experiencing in this country and in a lot of European nations is we're still getting our heads around the practicalities of how you vaccinate 70% of the population.
It's true, but actually we don't have the dose to vaccinate that many people at the same time. So all the doses that arrive are being used pretty much. And using pharmacy is just another option, and it's a good one for this vaccine that doesn't need to be kept in very cold conditions. And it also means that people who have no access to the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, because they are too young, can get vaccinated in pharmacies. So it's not so bad. It's not bad. It's not a bad idea. But I don't think that AstraZeneca's vaccine. Yeah.
Go ahead. You were saying.
Go ahead. I don't think that it is true that this vaccine doesn't work for older people. I think that there is no data to say that the effect is different according to age. And in the phase 2 studies, the antibodies were produced similarly in all age groups. So there's pretty much no reason not to use it for older people, except that it's a little bit less efficient than the other vaccines.
Jakob Hessler, we're getting to the heart of the matter already here, which is that so the European Union decided it didn't want to replicate the sort of nations fighting amongst themselves, so they decide to negotiate. They negotiate in the spring. Of course, at that time, we don't know which vaccines are going to work at the end of the day or not.
Yeah, well, but in a way, they played cautious. And then some countries in the EU actually ordered less. They were very hesitant. And then at a later stage, some other countries who had a buffer, and I think Poland, for example, received a buffer because suddenly it also jumped on the vaccination train a bit later, which then some people in some other countries, which were very early or more bold, then regretted. But overall, I think when you don't know, you take bets. And in the same way, well, money was given to a lot of pharmaceutical companies, but that's to ramp up production for a vaccine whose efficacy wasn't proved. But that was a bet I think everyone was consciously taking. And we can't blame now those whose vaccine doesn't work for having invested in a plant that we don't need because, well, that was the bet.
But we want to believe in the AstraZeneca one because, as we saw in that report, it's much easier to transport it, so it's easier to distribute.
Yeah, but there's the AstraZeneca one. There's also the Sanofi one. So far, the Sanofi one, there is no proof that it doesn't work. It's just that the test, from what I understand, that the reactants they used were deficient and didn't see it quick enough. So we have a delay. But there is so far no indication that it doesn't work. So I think there is this issue of us all being impatient, of having there are flaws in the way we deal with this pandemic. And now we need to be careful to not ride it out, so to speak, on the back of the vaccine development when, in fact, there's a lot of other problems around.
And we've seen a lot of public pressure in the last couple of weeks on leaders in France, in Germany, over the fact that they see the UK where the vaccination rate has been much higher and tension brewing. Last week, the European Commission president had to climb down from a threat to hold off on exporting vaccines to the UK. Ursula von der Leyen, who in a Tuesday interview with German television, again pledged to meet that goal of 70% of the population vaccinated by the fall.
I've had a very good conversation with AstraZeneca's CEO today. We as the EU signed the contract in August.
The Brits in May.
Which was 4 to 5 months after the outbreak of the pandemic. Never before has a vaccine been available so soon, after 10 months. But the good news is, AstraZeneca's CEO told me that they will prepone their delivery by 1 week, so we can expect the first deliveries from AstraZeneca by the end of next week.
Margrethe Auken, how is the European Union doing when it comes to the rollout of vaccines?
Well, in a way, I think they're doing quite well. You know, everything has been so fast here, and we are all, quite impressed now that we managed to do it. And I think also that we were, at least I feel that it was good that they were reluctant to just to take on board. You know, you've been looking at UK, you've been looking at Israel, but they didn't have the safety that we were going for, and now they succeeded, we hope, but they have used their own population as test persons. Thank you, we shouldn't do it to our people. And I also think that they has, as far as I can follow, with of course some troubles with the delivery and distribution. And where I really think that they didn't do well in the EU was that contracts was kept secret. We couldn't get access from many parties in Parliament. We called for transparency already early. We want to see these contracts. How are taxpayers' money spent here, and how much is there? And that has been almost in the dark. And there I feel that the trust has been weakened, should we put it like that. And still we don't know exactly. And when we asked, we had Ursula von der Leyen in the Green Group today, and when we asked about it, well, she said, well, you know, that is the member states to find out how to go through this year. That's the industry who has the right to keep these contracts secret. I really hope that when it comes to the publication of the data from the clinical trials, that then they will follow what is now in the EU law, that we should have full access.
It's not just the contracts that have been secret. In some cases, it was for a while, at least, according to reports, the actual negotiators for the EU that were secret. Turns out that one of them knows the pharmaceutical companies more than a little. Thomas Bergström, between 2011 and 2016, was head of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industry Associations, the EFPIA. He's today Sweden's national vaccine coordinator. When you hear that, Margrethe Auken, you say, oh, this is great. We've got a negotiator who knows where the bodies are buried? Or do you say, oh, this is awful. This is a conflict of interest?
I think that we try to put this question of conflict of interest. You're absolutely right. And what you probably don't know is that it's so difficult to get this whole understanding of conflict of interest, not only into the EU institutions, but in so many. Ask medical doctors, ask them. They have bonds in the pharmaceutical industry. And we said, you know, there should be no conflict of interest. And that was raised, but, you know, it was more or less ignored. And I still think that we should put lots of emphasis for that. But apart from that, I really feel that we could get no insight in the contracts was a scandal. And that really creates lots of suspicion to the Commission here. And they are trapped in it also. How is the delivery agreed on? Can we see that? How much? Suddenly we hear that they are selling their vaccines to others and instead of delivering to us. And then, of course, we had the whole issue, but that's not the topic for you just now, on the global obligation I think we have to make the whole, everybody, you know, also in the poor countries, the LDC countries.
No, it very much is the topic, and we'll be talking about it a little bit later on. But let me ask, Thérèse Bouvret, do you agree that there could be more transparency at the EU level when it comes to who they're negotiating with and what deals they're striking when it comes to those vaccines?
Yes, indeed. I think it would be better to get transparency, but I am not really involved in this inquiry with Le Monde and ONG that gathered to make this enquête. But it's not biotechs, it's at the level of pharmaceutical groups and not simple biotechs which are little companies between 25 and 100 people working inside. So at my level, when I am looking for biotechs, I'm not competent to answer on this question.
But we will be asking about the question of whether or not this has laid bare issues when it comes to innovation and, you know, in this race to get the right vaccine out. a little bit later on. Let me turn to you, Jakob Hessler. Your reaction to the criticism you heard from Margrethe Auken there.
Well, I think there's a balance. I think conflict of interest. There is no someone with a successful career. You'll find very few very good people who will not at one point in their lives have had some contact, and particularly in the medical field. Now that doesn't mean that it's not healable. So I think the most important thing is transparency. Is that you need to be clear on making it transparent, who's negotiating, what are their interests, etc. On the contracts themselves, the fact is the EU pays a lot less to AstraZeneca, from what I understand, per doses than, for example, the UK. And the fact that some of these contractual arrangements are kept secret is also because the industries are ready to give the EU, with its demand power, maybe a better deal than single countries. And that's also a fact. So there's a balance to be found.
Catherine Hill, do you agree?
Yeah, well, as a taxpayer and as a citizen, I want to know where my money went, and I want to know why this particular vaccine is more expensive than that other vaccine. That said, it was a very wise decision to subsidize the development of these vaccines, and it's a wonderful success to have several vaccines that are effective.
All right, we're going to talk more when we come back about what this vaccine race has taught us about our healthcare system. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're asking about the race to vaccinate. What lessons so far? It's been a little over a month since the first vaccines started arriving to market here in Europe. With us is epidemiologist Catherine Hill, entrepreneur and commentator Jakob Hessler, Thérèse Bouvray, publisher of the newsletter biotech.info, and from Copenhagen, Danish Green member of the European Parliament, Margrethe Auken. Welcome back to all of you. Yeah, the silver linings, we've talked about them, the fact that the vaccines have come to market in record time, and the fact that there are more and more of them. Latest example, Sputnik V, the Russian vaccine, deemed 91% effective in an interim study that was published in the UK medical journal The Lancet on Tuesday. When asked, Germany's chancellor said, well, she's open-minded.
Jeder Impfstoff ist in der Europäischen Union willkommen, aber es wird nur der zugelassen, der von der Europäischen Medizinagentur auch die notwendigen Daten bringt.
Is this a good news story, Catherine Hill, the arrival of the Russian vaccine? Are you surprised because people had scoffed at the fact that it was rolled out so fast?
Yeah, but not so fast after all. And the study was very well done, and the results are very convincing. And 91% efficacy is quite good. Plus, it's easier to distribute. So, yeah, it's very good news.
Jakob Hessler?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it seems to be a very good vaccine. And so, good research, and it seems to work. So.
All right. There's a measure of nationalism, Margrethe Auken, isn't there? Because we only trust things that come from Europe or the United States, it seems.
Well, I don't think so. We were told from EMA the other day, the European Medical Agency, that they were in contact with the Russians on this Sputnik issue. And I just read just today in the Danish news agency about some, outstanding experts being quite positive to this vaccine. So. Well, let us see. People are. It's tested now in the population, and that would be great to have more vaccines. And if you can handle them without these demands of 42 degrees of minus degrees or what it could be, that'd be fine. And if they're cheaper, that'd be extra fine. So no, I have no idea that it should be better to get European or American vaccines if they are okay.
Right now, what's the situation in Denmark itself? Because here in France, we're fuming over the fact that we're way behind the UK and way behind Germany when it comes to the percentage of the population that's been inoculated.
Well, you know, in Denmark, we are not too impressed either. We have just, I think, around the percentage. We are vaccinating first and foremost old, vulnerable people, people with chronic diseases and so on. And that hasn't been finished yet. So the speed is not impressive. And there we have the feeling that, not the feeling, you know, we can really see it, that the delivery from industry is not living up to at least what we was told. But there we again miss the full transparency on the contracts, what was in these contracts. But it's not good enough in Denmark, I think. But still, I'm quite impressed that we are already there now, because I was told when we started, it could take years before we had vaccines we could trust.
Yeah, here in France, it's, well, a bit of hurt pride, you might say. We talked just a moment ago about a bit of vaccine nationalism. This country is home to pharmaceutical giant Sanofi. It's home to the Pasteur Institute. And for the time being, it finds itself relegated to the role of potential production hub. Mario Sofos reports on President Macron's announcement of 4 new production sites.
At this French vaccination centre, it's time for these patients to get their second dose. 2 COVID-19 vaccines are on offer here, those developed by the Pfizer and Moderna labs. In a few weeks, doses like this are expected to be produced by manufacturers in France, as the President outlined on Wednesday.
Ce qu'il faut réussir à mobiliser, ce sont tous les laboratoires qui permettent de produire ces vaccins homologués par nos autorités sanitaires pour le plus vite possible acquérir le maximum de doses en toute sécurité.
4 vaccine production sites have been identified so far, one in the west of the country that will manage Moderna's vaccine, one in northern France that will be responsible for the Pfizer vaccine, Sanofi lab in the Paris region that's expected to produce its own vaccine by the end of the year, and another in southwestern France that will be responsible for the CureVac vaccine once it's been approved. Apart from Sanofi, none of the sites are strictly producing the vaccine, rather they're bottling the doses. The vaccines that come from these sites will not only be for use in France, but the contribution is expected to help speed up the country's vaccination programme.
Le premier site de production qui démarrera, ça sera courant mars pour le vaccin Moderna. Nous aurons ensuite un site de production qui démarrera courant avril. Ce sera pour le vaccin Pfizer-BioNTech. Et au mois de mai, ce devrait être pour le vaccin CureVac. Là, nous attendons l'autorisation de mise sur le marché.
The French government wants all those who wish to get vaccinated to be able to make an appointment by the end of the summer.
So, Catherine Hill, producing vaccines, but for labs that are not French, not for Sanofi and not for the Pasteur Institute. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the word producing is a misnomer. It's bottling, I think. The vaccines are
Correct.
not going to be manufactured per se in France. We're just going to be subcontractors bottling the thing.
At the end of the day, does this matter who makes them, or do you feel a bit of hurt pride as a French woman?
I do feel a bit of hurt pride. I mean, we haven't contributed anything interesting in this race for vaccines, and now we are reduced to being in charge of putting into bottles and a sticker on the bottle. It's not a very exciting job. I mean, we have to do it, and I'm sure we'll do it happily, but still, it hurts a bit.
How do you explain it? Because, there's been the charge leveled that France even sort of railroaded through setting aside a space for Sanofi and Pasteur Institute at the European level, and then there were these setbacks. Is this just a problem of, the bad luck, or is there a bigger problem?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on the organization of those things. It could be bad luck. This mRNA came as a wonderful surprise, and it was surprising. And the more standard vaccines, so far, AstraZeneca has more standard vaccine is less effective, and now we have Sputnik V, which is better. So it's play of chance, some of that.
The Sanofi one, actually it's interesting to look at the development, because the first out with a promising sort of concept, who got the first big money, was actually Sanofi. They got the first huge contract from the US government at the time when there were these rumors that Donald Trump wanted to buy CureVac, if you remember those stories. And it is still out. Maybe the Sanofi vaccine is as good as the other conventional ones. We don't know yet. The problem is that in the testing, they messed it up, from what I understand. But maybe one of the epidemiologist experts.
The other charge that's been leveled in the press is that France has distinguished itself, a country, again, that was known for things like being groundbreaking when it comes to finding therapies for AIDS. Wound up being instead, during this pandemic, grabbing headlines for the wrong reasons, particularly when it came to things like hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah, I think the deeper, well, there may be an issue about funding, although Sanofi is a well-funded big corporation. If that is a private sector, not a public sector issue. I think the other issues we're talking about are public sector distribution and the organization of the state from top to bottom and bottom back up, which I think the pandemic has revealed fundamental structural weaknesses of the French model and the way the different parts play together, or actually don't, when there's stress on the system. And that's, I think, the real soul-searching should, in my view, start there.
So, Thérèse Bouvray, your remit is biotech, as you say, innovation. Is there the sense that France, at least it appears to be the case so far when it comes to vaccines, is not that sort of hive of innovation that it once was?
I don't think so. I think innovation in France is still very high on the research scientific research too. Maybe Pasteur and Sanofi from the beginning, they told that they don't mean to be in late, besides the others, and especially Sanofi, especially Pasteur. But now in France, there are many companies, biotech companies, which aimed at inflammation and immunity, and they have been able, since last March, to redirect their work toward new development of new therapies, some of them with new vaccines. For instance, we can speak about OSE Immunotherapeutics, a biotech company which develops vaccine therapies, immunotherapies against cancer. But now they have a vaccine, Covid-19, which is in phase 1, and it could be in phase 3 within 2022. And there is another company which prepared a vaccine against flu, and she is now redirecting his research to develop a vaccine against coronavirus, and it's the same sort of strategy to develop these vaccines, and they started and they have been helped by French government.
Okay, so those are positive examples, but there's the charge level that there just isn't enough spending that's going on in research, in development. Le Monde reporting that in the period from 2002 to 2008, the U.S. more than tripled its public investment in vaccines to more than 42 million euros. At the same time, EU nations, their investment dropped to a measly 1.9 million. Yeah, Le Figaro, the French broadsheet, this Wednesday devoted 6 pages to the lag in public investment. and the brain drain. The best and the brightest who've migrated abroad include AstraZeneca boss Pascal Soriot and Stéphane Bancel of Moderna. Again, it's the question, and I'll ask it again: is does France have a problem that it's just not as attractive as it once was? It's just not investing enough in research.
But, this morning there was a press conference from France Biotech, which gathers many biotech entrepreneurs, and justement the CEO of the immunotherapeutics, he told that they have some help from French government, but it's not enough because, for instance, CureVac could obtain 300 million from German government, or BioNTech 400 million, and they have not this amount of money, so they have to be connected with big pharma when they will be in phase 3. They have to be.
So let me put this to Catherine Hill. We had Dr. Hill back in the spring. We had this moment of reckoning when we saw that the essential care workers who were on the front line when the pandemic hit, that they weren't being paid enough. And there was the idea that this was a moment of reckoning. Is this now a moment of reckoning when it comes to research and development, that investing the money to update our public health services?
Well, it's certainly necessary, but at the end of this crisis, the country is going to be so broke that I have very little hope that they're going to start putting more money in research. I'm rather scared, and it's true that many young researchers have to leave the country, or they go for postdoc abroad and they can't come back because there is no money, there's no funding for research. It is a problem. It is an obvious problem. Yeah. Well, but there are so many other problems with the basic health care.
But I think,
compare with Germany for us, Jakob.
Well, I think there has been a step up in quite a few European countries, the UK actually, and Germany, that have stepped up spending on R&D, both public but also private. And in France, there has been a more private spending, but it has been done through tax credit. And a lot of these tax credits have been used, I think half of them have been used by banks to finance financial innovation, where you can ask yourselves whether that's a good use of taxpayers' money. But the real spending hasn't risen to the level of these other countries. And ultimately, what is sad is that you produce excellent young scientists who are trained extremely well, and then the cream of them go off and go somewhere else, and that's where they then become famous and or create companies. And that is the real sort of the tragedy, or the issue to solve, which is at what point can you bring some of that brain back? It's good that they go to learn somewhere else. I mean, we shouldn't close borders, but we need to get them back.
Well, let me ask Margrethe Auken. It brings us back to the question we asked at the outset, which is Europe, when it came to the vaccines, decided on a continental strategy. It's a first, because usually the Health Commission at the European Union, it's a small remit. Now, when you look ahead to the strategy going forward, when it comes to research and development, is the answer national governments, local, EU, or the private sector?
Well, I think the answer is that we don't, in fact, really know. We don't have problems in Denmark with having money enough for research, and lots of course, public paid. And I think that we now give it to the industry for more or less for free. One of the problems, again, is transparency. We cannot see how money, how is the pricing in the industry. That's what we have been calling for. Also, we've done it in Denmark, but also in European Parliament. We've asked for much better also openness of what is, where are we on these issues here? Because it might be that you have a problem in France young scientists going abroad. It's not the problem in Denmark. I don't know how bad it is around. I think the real problem is now that we are not making sure that all the developing countries can get access to this vaccine, because before we have all them vaccinated, and that is much more my worry than before we have them vaccinated, we won't be safe ourselves either. So it's not only for moral reasons, it's also for health reasons we need to do that. And we to break down the patent system. And now I might shock somebody here, but I think that the patent system is one of the real blocks. And we put so much money into the pharmaceutical industry, also in Denmark. And we get, they're just rising prices for medicines. And we are now really trapped because they are blocking, it's member states, it's not the EU who should vote for in the WTO to go into this big opening the patents to the rest of the world. But we have so much resistance from the industry, which don't want at all to do that. And that is for me a heavy problem. And not that we don't have, but that might be a Danish privilege that we have young scientists leaving us. No, they are not. But they are going into money business sometimes more than research business.
Yeah, choosing the money side of it rather than the research side. Dr. Catherine Hill, I like your reaction to what you just heard there from Margrethe Auken about the need. Well, it's, we're priding ourselves on, or the President of the European Commission talks about this target of 70% of the continent vaccinated by the end of August. Margrethe is saying it's got to be, 70% of the planet. What percentage of the planet needs to be vaccinated for us to see the end of COVID as it is?
Well, the consensus is that it's something like 70%, but we don't know. If the vaccines mutates and becomes more contagious, then it might have to be a greater percentage. We just do not know. But it's true that it's worrisome that the rich countries are getting the vaccines and the poor countries are not. It is a problem, obviously.
Do you think that there will be a stepped-up impetus at the level of the World Health Organization to do something about it?
I have no idea. You have to ask them.
No, if I must just come in here, we asked Ursula von der Leyen today in the Green Group in Parliament, and it was clear that the answer was that this, of course, has to be done not so much in the WHO as in the WTO, in the World Trade Organization, but it is the member states who has to call for it, to have to try to unite. Of course, we should try to do it at unanimous or at, with big support from the EU member states. But it is a question of allowing South Africa, India, those countries who has a capacity, but they are not allowed to. They don't get access, and there I think it's also interest that we do that. It's not the WHO; it is the WTO, and there is a mechanism there where it can be done, but it needs support from all of us here.
So there is, and there is a precedent. For example, for children HIV, there is a WHO organization called UNITED that was created, and actually it created...
So there are mechanisms possible.
There is a mechanism. You can create a patent pool, even pooling several patents. You can then say they are only for certain geographies at certain prices, and you make sure that you do not violate the sort of application, and you avoid re-imports, etc. So it is possible to do that in a targeted way.
All right, something we'll be looking at. I want to thank you, Jakob Hassler. I want to thank Dr. Catherine Hill for being with us as well. Thérèse Bouvray, Margrethe Auken, thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.